My name is Hank Smith. I'm doing an interview of Mrs. Adele DiMarco Kious. She's an 8-year resident of the city of East Cleveland. Thank you for your interview.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
Okay. Mrs. Kious, tell me about yourself and the history of your family.
The history of my family, starting with
As far back as you want to go.
as far back as I want to go. So my family, my mother and my father. My mother grew up in Indiana and Michigan for the most part, and my maternal grandmother actually was from the hills of Kentucky.
Okay.
She was the 18th of 19 children.
Wow.
And interestingly, she married my grandfather, who was an only child. So that was some interesting family dynamics on that side.
It is.
And my mother had 3 sisters. They, for the most part, grew up in Fort Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother met my father when he moved there to go to college to study engineering. My father actually immigrated from Sicily when he was a young child, and he was also the oldest of 3.
Okay.
And when his family immigrated, they moved to the kind of the Finger Lakes region of New York State.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting mix. My parents, sadly, were not together long. We lived in Rochester, New York. That's where I was born.
Okay.
And they separated, and my mother and I moved back to Indiana, where I grew up for the most part until my mid-20s. I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is a small city, about a couple 100,000 people. And it was a pretty homogeneous city, somewhat insular, very kind of Catholic and Lutheran culture in many ways. And I knew I didn't fit in there somehow, even as a young child. I knew there was another place for me.
Okay.
And I actually used to come through Cleveland. We would drive, my father's side of the family was still in Rochester, New York, and as a child we would drive back and forth, and Cleveland was always the halfway point.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
years later, in my 20s, I actually moved here to Cleveland to go to graduate school at Case Western Reserve University, and came to settle in the Cleveland Heights area, and absolutely fell in love really with the Heights. Mostly because of the community, that it was racially diverse. I didn't experience that where I grew up.
Okay.
So that was something new for me and something that really intrigued me. And I really just loved the beauty of the community. That the buildings were beautiful, and there were trees, and there were sidewalks where people walked. Like, I grew up in suburbia and didn't experience that. So, and then my current family, who I consider family, my husband, he and his family moved here. My mother-in-law is actually South African, and my father-in-law grew up in California, and he was a missionary, and they met through the Methodist Church doing interracial work in the 70s in South Africa.
Oh, okay.
Under apartheid. So they basically got kicked out of the country, or he did, and they ended up moving to Cleveland, also because of Case Western Reserve. After my husband was just a little baby, and they moved here because my father-in-law got accepted into medical school here, into medical school. So my husband really grew up in the Heights. This is the Heights area was home to him, and when we were looking for a home, we had moved away for a short period of time, although we met here in Cleveland Heights area. And I have one sibling. Oops, sorry, I touched the microphone. I have one sibling who's 10 years younger than I am, and he was paralyzed in a car accident when he was a young boy, when he was 13, and has now been in a wheelchair for 20 years. And so what was really important to me was to find a home where my brother could come and stay with us.
Okay.
And this neighborhood, the Forestville neighborhood, had that. Homes that were one story. And that was initially the reason we came here. We found this home, which we love, and the street, which we love, the trees especially. I'm still getting to know the people. What I'm struck by is many of the people that live on our street have been here for decades.
Okay.
So that's really inspiring.
Right.
And I'm leaning into doing a better job of getting to know my neighbors more, and Because that's what I'm realizing I want for more in my life in terms of really living abundantly.
Right.
More connected to my neighbors.
Same here. Yeah. I love this part of East Cleveland and Cleveland Heights. You know, the parks and everything, and like you say, you can walk up and down the streets. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and we have a little boy who's 3.
Oh,
he's
yeah. Can't forget him.
No, our little
yeah,
Jim.
He's great. Can you think back to your earliest memories of East Cleveland and tell me what life was like then?
Well, I don't, since I moved here in 1995, I don't know what life was like here, and quite honestly, I didn't come through East Cleveland often until we moved here. Mm-hmm. So I've heard stories of what it was like, and it's interesting to me because they're depending on what era someone's referring to, the stories are very different.
Yeah.
But I'm often curious about it, living in this neighborhood with the historic homes at the end of the street. I kind of go in my imagination, wonder, at one point this was Rockefeller's estate, and he had his own private railroad stop.
Right.
And then he was building housing for his corporate employees.
Yeah.
That was very exclusive, to put it diplomatically. And then in the 50s, at least in this area, and then of course I heard about the redlining and blockbusting. People tell stories about how quickly that happened.
Right, yeah.
So it makes me very curious. So, my earliest memories really of coming through East Cleveland are really from only like 9 years ago, which is when I started coming through, even though, interestingly, I was often just a few blocks away.
Right. And, this area is a little different from the inner part of East Cleveland.
Yeah, people say to me, you live up the hill.
Right, you get a lot of that, yeah.
In fact, some people tell me who are from East Cleveland that I do civic work with, they tease me, they're like, you don't really live in East Cleveland. I'm like, well, that's what's on your micrograph.
Yes. Well, go ahead and claim East Cleveland.
I do. EC. I say that. I have a sense of that there's a sense of emergence here. I don't know a lot, and I don't know Gary Norton, Mayor Norton personally. I know as a neighbor, neighborly, saying hi and talking, and I do have faith in his leadership and that good things.
Yeah, he seems to be doing a good job.
Yeah.
I'm glad he's our mayor.
Yeah, I am too.
What are your fondest memories of East Cleveland?
My fondest memory, my fondest memory is the day my son was born.
Okay.
He was born at Huron Hospital.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's amazingly sad to me that hospital is gone.
Right, that was a good asset.
Yeah. So my fondest memory is actually the day we brought him home from the hospital, and we drove up Forest Hill Boulevard, and it was a wintry day, and all of the trees were covered in snow and ice, and it just because we were bringing our son home from the hospital, it just felt like a fairyland. So that's one, and really, a lot of my relationship with the city, I have to say, is through use of the park over there, and I love walking through there, and the little music park that was put in last year is wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
Kalel and I love to go there. We were sad we went in the fall and everything was put away. I mean, I think it's smart that they put everything away. We were like, oh, our music park is gone. So I would say it's really the beauty of East Cleveland and of the nature that's here.
Did you see the white duck that was out there over the past summer?
No.
Oh, it was a beautiful white duck, and it was the only one with all of the geese, all the Canadian geese. I used to go over there just to watch them. It was quite a sight.
Wow.
Yeah, I wish you'd have seen it. Yeah, I took some pictures.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the trees in that park, which I always say, I bet no one knows that this amazing asset. When they think of East Cleveland. It's mostly park, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's beautiful over there. And especially, like you say, when the snow first hits the trees and you got that glistening, that Wonderland type thing. I love it, you know. Yeah. So I'm glad you are able to appreciate those kind of things living up here, because down in the city it's kind of difficult.
I know, that makes me sad. I think a lot about that, like how could there be more connections? How could the park be used more as a connective tissue?
Right, yeah.
And I know I imagine there are barriers to that, even just in mindset, because I know not everybody thinks the park is a great place to go.
They should come up there, try it.
I do see young people hanging out there more and more in families,
Right.
and I've had some good conversations with some like kids that go to Shaw and hanging out. Not often, but on occasion.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a good place to have activities like they do at Wade Oval. You know?
Yeah.
And that would kind of bring people together, I think.
I do too. Chris and I, my husband and I, have talked about it. Like, what if there was ice skating? I mean, you'd have to have winter cooperate, of course, but.
Right.
You know, ice skating at the pond and like
Right.
a hot chocolate stand there in the pavilion.
Some kind of winter activity, yeah.
Right. Or in the summer, little paddle boats that you could rent.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
See, you have some ideas. Okay, in what ways have the city
Changed over time, and what do you think contributed to those changes?
Well, what I would say is really just based on hearsay. So I'll speak to two things. One, of what I've heard, and then two, of what I've experienced since I've lived here. You know, I've heard stories about the changes over time, from kind of the Rockefeller era up through the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then, you know, as a result of, I think the connection was around the killing of Dr. King, and then the Huff riots, and the fear that spread, and how quickly that fear spread, and then the blockbusting and redlining and things that started to happen. I don't know if there was redlining here, but for sure blockbusting.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories of just how quickly things changed.
Could you elaborate a little more on the blockbusting?
Well, the stories that I've heard is that people saying, coming up at like realtor type people coming up and knocking on people's doors, people who are white that lived in houses and saying, you know, you better sell.
Okay.
The neighborhood's turning.
Okay, right.
And I've even heard stories that there was collusion even with on the business side of that, you know, in terms of the realtor community, and I don't know, it's so rumors and hearsay, but that people leaving quickly and then other African American families moving in because there was opportunity, beautiful housing stock, neighborhood with a great reputation. So, and from what I've heard, many people moved to Cleveland Heights.
Yeah.
I don't know where all the migration went, but that the main thing that I hear from the stories is the quickness with which it happens.
Right, yeah.
And how powerful fear can be.
Have you noticed a lot of foreclosures in this area?
We have seen some, and what's been really cool is they have all been taken care of. So there used to be a house the next block over facing Lee that was abandoned, really, and my husband mowed the lawn for a couple of years just to make sure it didn't look bad.
Right.
And then somebody bought it and fixed it up and moved in.
So these houses, they fill up pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, such a gorgeous neighborhood.
Right.
And that house had a view of the pond. And
Yeah.
wouldn't, you know,
Right.
if somebody had the will and the skill to
Yeah.
take that project on.
Yeah.
And then there was another one on Forest Hill Boulevard that was vacant for a while, and somebody bought that and fixed it up and moved in. And
See, that's a big difference between up here and down there, you know, because once the houses get empty, they get basically abandoned,
yeah,
you know.
I mean, it's a huge issue in Cleveland in general. I mean, my husband works in that area indirectly. He does deconstruction. And, you know, sadly, he has a lot of supply because because of.
So he might be getting contracts from the city to do some of the demolition.
He did a little bit. It's kind of a tricky thing. He doesn't do demolition. He does deconstruction, and it costs a little bit more because you're actually taking the house apart
Oh,
and
okay.
harvesting the structural wood because it's such high value. You can't buy anything like that like the wood of the floors.
Yeah.
But not the pretty stuff that people think of, like banisters and, I mean, that there's a market that already exists for that. That can be sold pretty easily.
Right.
But the structural stuff you have to take, it's called upcycling. You actually have to process it and then turn it into something else.
Wow, that's all right.
Yeah, that's his business.
That's great business.
Yeah. Called APOC, a piece of Cleveland.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's talked to Mayor Norton a few times, and he's actually did a project. You know the 3 buildings across from McDonald's that were on Eddy?
Yes, right.
He took those down. That was a collaborative project. That was a workforce development project with the county land bank.
Right. I'll be glad when they do something with the property now.
I know. This is an amazing piece of property.
Yeah, that and the place where Huron Road Hospital was.
I know.
You know, there's so much opportunity now that they're clearing out some of these abandoned places. You know, so hopefully we can get a contractor in here and start doing something positive.
Yeah. Well, and then the other change I have seen is along Euclid. You know, those new apartments that went up, and
and that's great.
I really experience a positive vibe when I go up Euclid.
I do too. Yeah.
The energy is changing.
And I can see Cleveland Clinic, University Circle moving in that direction. So hopefully they will see the value of the property.
Yeah. Well, it feels different. You know, as you do work with Neighborhood Connections, and you've been I've been meeting with staff there in that new, is it called Uptown?
Yes, right.
Where there's the Panera and
right.
And I went to a meeting, you know, I go up Euclid, and I said to them, this is so interesting. The presence of those buildings there causes me to experience East Cleveland differently. I feel like there's more connection.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't, you know how it used to just feel like, you almost drove through like this void when you would go from East Cleveland into, there was this couple blocks, you know, right before the train bridge and right after the train bridge.
Yeah.
But now that there's more there, it feels more connected.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And I look to see a lot more things happening in that area. Yeah.
And I know that was Mayor Norton's vision. I remember when he was running, he had that, and I really supported that.
Yeah. What do you think about the city government?
You know, I am somewhat disappointed in myself that I haven't been more involved. I'm not a big political involvement person, and I know it's important. I'm a little disappointed in the dynamic between city council and the mayor's office. And I don't understand it. And it just seems like there are bigger fish to fry. In a community that has some real issues to be dealt with, that back and forth. But again, I don't have a rich understanding of the tit for tat or whatever it is that's happening. But it seems like Mayor Norton's been able to rise above it to the best of my observation, but I could be mistaken.
I'll stop it for a minute.
Okay.
All right. How has race and racism impacted you personally, and how has it impacted the city of East Cleveland?
Good question. Race and racism impacted me personally. I think, you know, as a white woman, it's challenging to know how race and racism has impacted me personally because I'm oblivious a lot of the time because of my privilege. Being white. Awareness of race and racism is something that I'm investing my time in. I'm doing work with the YWCA and the racial inclusion program, and so being more aware of the dynamics of race and racism has really helped me in my spiritual growth, to make this spiritual journey, and why to me racial inclusion is so important. Feminism. Really seeing that racism exists and being active at working toward it not existing, I guess, but managing it differently. Acknowledging it and managing it differently so that we have more equality and inclusion. Significantly impacted East Cleveland based on and East Cleveland being perceived of as a black community or a city where only African Americans live, and I think also coming with that, there's a perception that people are less affluent.
Okay.
And so I think that presents a challenge for East Cleveland to be seen and valued by the rest of our community. I know when I tell people I live in East Cleveland, they're usually pretty surprised.
Yeah.
Because there's a stereotype
Exactly.
about who lives there.
Yeah.
So I actually like telling people that just to jar them a little bit, just to see their response.
That's good.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
My husband and I get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't think that, this might sound kind of edgy, but I think that one has to talk about race and racism in order to talk about the future of East Cleveland and the dynamics of East Cleveland. I mean, it's like avoiding the elephant in the room if you're not talking about it. And why, even with what borders, being somebody that's very passionate also about Cleveland Heights, I remember right before this was before we even moved here, interestingly, I realized that it was in Cleveland Heights' best interest to be concerned about what's happening in East Cleveland. And it was anybody who borders, you can't just pretend, you can't turn your back to who borders you. You've got to really be, to the best that you can, involved and interested, which takes it to a higher level of regionalism.
But this area, say Henley Avenue, Henley Road, is it somewhat diverse?
Racially diverse?
Yes.
It's a good question. I mean, there are probably, of the 3 blocks that I know of, maybe 4 or 5 of the houses were the minority, and that may be a stretch.
Yes. Has inequality impacted you personally? Well,
Inequality.
And do you see how it has impacted the city of East Cleveland?
Sure. Well, racial inequality, I mean, I feel like it impacts me, but not in the same way if I was a person of color, but it impacts me because, we're all connected. So when someone else suffers, we all are suffering, whether or not we're aware of it. Gender inequality is another subject, but even in that's not something I am as aware of. And I think inequality has affected the city of East Cleveland because I think I see racism as systemic, and so the level at which racism is impacting on the system as a whole in terms of the structures of policies and procedures and our criminal justice system, our education system, all of that combined is to me a big part of how and why East Cleveland found itself in a place of great challenge. I guess I don't really know and understand what happened over the past 30 or 40 years. And I really don't know, quite honestly, a lot of families that live in the part of East Cleveland that I think most people, the part of East Cleveland that's not up the hill. I don't know as many families there. I know people that tell me they grew up there, but I don't know if many of them still live there. So I know that I've been to Shaw High School and I've been really impressed with the young people that I've met that go there. So, in fact, in some ways, I know I actually have worked with kids that lived in the city of Cleveland that lived more in Central, and they were trying to go to Shaw because they thought it had a better reputation, interestingly.
That is something.
Yeah, isn't that how, teenagers, who knows how they learn or hear. It could be that they had a girlfriend that goes there, but Yeah, I think collectively structural systemic racism and inequality has impacted our city primarily because it's, what is it, 98% African American probably?
About that, yeah. Can you recollect a memory or instance when the community fought for something since you've been here?
Sure. There's a couple of things that people have fought for. I remember when the most active I saw people on the street was to get rid of those speed cameras. That really brought people out. I am not a fan of this. Personally, I don't like getting tickets from the speed cameras, and I think they're actually smart government because they generate revenue, and even though I'm not good at, I just don't drive down the streets that have them because I know I'm not good at following this. I just don't even realize it, and I get a ticket. So that, and then my father-in-law, Dr. Gus Kious, was very much involved with really wanting to save Huron Hospital, and so I was more on the fringes of that, and that was really heartbreaking.
Yeah, that was a big fight.
That was a big fight, yeah, and he used every strategy he knew how, from calling people in Washington to, and yeah, it's just still amazing to me to drive down the hill and it's gone.
Yeah. So he was more on the side of trying to save it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, that was a personal fight. It was like David and Goliath, inside. Right. And I'm not throwing the camera. He knew about it for a long. Yeah. He was working on it for a long time.
Trying to save it. Mm-hmm. That's excellent. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's still hard for him, I think, because a lot of people didn't know that the story of Huron Hospital was really, from some metrics that you looked at, it was a top performing hospital. Revenue overall, it was losing money. I don't understand all the nuances, but in other ways it was, they had some of the best people there and really excellent teams and a lot of other success metrics, but that wasn't the story that got told.
Right. It never is.
Right.
Okay, how have surrounding institutions and the city of East Cleveland, the surrounding institutions and cities impacted East Cleveland?
That's a good question. I have to overall say I don't know. I just know the little bit that I perceive. I don't know how involved Cleveland Heights is with East Cleveland. Like I said earlier, I would like for them to be involved, and I think they would be smart if they actually saw that it's in their best interest to see that East Cleveland does well. I do know what I've heard about University Circle, and University Circle being more intentional about feeling connected to East Cleveland is powerful. And really even the Cleveland Foundation with its Neighborhood Connections program, and in the recent years, Neighborhood Connections including East Cleveland in their grant making. Yeah. So that was something really positive. And I'm trying to think of other institutions.
Then we have University Circle include East Cleveland and their
footprint, so to speak. Yeah.
And their district.
Yeah, because it's right here. So I've never had a conversation with Chris Ronayne, who is the head of University Circle Incorporated, about it, but it definitely feels like there's more happening. Like I shared the story earlier, that now I literally experience even this street differently with Uptown, because I somehow feel more connected to University Circle than I did before, with those apartment buildings in East Cleveland. Are they apartments or condos? I'm not sure. Condos. And then the new retail development coming closer to the train bridge, and there are things happening. It's positive energy.
It sure is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever use the East Cleveland Public Library?
You know, I've only been there for a few performances.
Okay.
It's, you know, I'm glad you're saying that because we moved from Cleveland Heights and I had a universal card, I just am in the habit of going to the Heights Library, but I'm glad you're mentioning that because this one's actually closer. And I know there's a lot of pride in the library.
Yeah, it is. I think East Cleveland residents are glad that we were able to keep it outside the county.
Yeah.
You know, what do you think of that? Do you think it would have been a smarter move to go with the county or to be independent?
That is a real struggle for me because I actually know the woman, Sherry Feldman, who's the head of the county system, and it's an amazing, high quality system.
Right.
It's one of the best in the world.
Yeah, it is.
And I've done a lot of work around kind of economics of nonprofit organizations and more of them merging and collaborating. So from that perspective, I think it would make sense to merge. And the other part of me just sees that it is an incredible source of civic pride for East Cleveland. So, I mean, I think it would be ideal if there could be some happy medium. I've never seen a fiscal analysis of our city budget to see how much the library costs us, you know,
Right.
and what, you know, to see the breakdown. But, you know, if there were some savings, but it's not always about money. You know, that's a short
I think that
answer.
civic pride had a lot to do with why it's still,
Yeah,
while it's still here.
yeah.
And I can understand that too, you know, but then again, I look at the fact that economically, is it feasible?
Yeah, over time. I mean, sometimes I wonder, is East Cleveland economically feasible over time? I mean, and that, I mean that for Cleveland, East Cleveland in general, but just like our region, is it feasible for all of our municipalities to exist independently? That's been a big conversation for the past 10 years, and it's one we're going to have to continue to confront because the trend across the country is municipalities are financially struggling.
I get a lot of talk, a lot of people were talking about Cleveland up south and absorbing East Cleveland, also Cleveland Heights. You know, do you think that's a viable idea?
I mean, I can see how it's an idea. I can see how people say that. And my husband and I have joked, we're like, maybe we'll end up moving cities without leaving our house. I don't know. I mean, it's funny because I had more of a sense of that a year ago, but this year I don't have as much of a sense of that, just with more positive things happening. But, or I should say, and cities are still struggling financially. I'm not completely clear on where East Cleveland's situation is. And I go back and forth. I mean, part of me thinks it would be good to be absorbed by Cleveland Heights. The two biggest issues to me are the school, because I think there's so much pride in our school district as well. And it would be sad for me to see it get absorbed by a huge district like CMSD. And then Cleveland Heights, oops, I'll turn that off. I don't know. And then sometimes I think they'll divide it in half, you know, and I'm like, that doesn't feel right.
You mean like as far as Cleveland Heights taking the upper part?
Yeah.
You know,
Just like exacerbating the dynamic that's already here.
Yeah, that would be bad.
But I have to tell you, some of my neighbors would love for that to happen, which kind of surprised me. I was like, really? You know, my neighbor across the street was like, I would love it if Cleveland Heights took over our neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what that would cost due to a person's tax rate.
It's not really that much different.
It's not?
No.
Oh.
We looked into it.
Yeah.
We thought it was going to be a lot less expensive to live here, but it's tiny difference.
Right.
So,
what is your vision for the future of East Cleveland And tell me about the major issues that need addressing in order to better your neighborhood, the community, and the city.
Well, I have a vision for East Cleveland. It sounds maybe pretty crazy radical, but I really believe that our park is an asset not only to our city but actually to the region, because there's a greenway that connects, and I really believe that a huge advantage of Cleveland in general, and East Cleveland in particular, is this combination to have an urban experience surrounded by nature. It's a very rare combination, at least in America. And so there's part of me, because there's so much vacant land in East Cleveland, I think there could be to do something really kind of more cutting edge and interesting, like something that, like I have the ideas of even doing like co-housing or some type of community development that would involve people growing their own food and even having some alternative healing arts there, and people living more intergenerationally and having maybe some space where people can come together for shared meals. There are models of this around the world and around the country that people talk about, and I just have this feeling that East Cleveland, because there's so much land available and because it's so close to the park, could be something there. But that's just one idea, and I know that's my idea, and I'm like, I don't even know if anybody else would be interested in that. So I think that also just finding more ways to leverage the fact that we have that green space creatively, whether it's having more educational opportunities or more kind of classrooms in the park, hikes and tours. It's like, it's a forest, literally. I think the other thing is really the strategy. What was the second part of that class? Strategies for us to get there? The question?
Major issues that need addressing in order to improve the community.
Right. I think there are the more well-known major issues that I imagine are like issues around employment and safety.
Right.
I think the other major issue is people, which Neighborhood Connections is addressing, is just people knowing their neighbors and getting involved.
Right.
And really having a belief and a sense of effectiveness, like really believing that you can get involved and you will make a difference. And in fact, that's really the best way to make a difference, is you have to get involved in some way. And I hold that even myself in that category, because I'm very involved in community in different dimensions, but I have not been as involved in East Cleveland, and that kind of looms over me. I mean, I'm a trustee in our neighborhood association. I haven't been as active as I would like to be in that. So I look in the mirror in regard to that, as even myself becoming more engaged and active with decisions that are made, and encouraging others as well to believe that you can make a difference if you get involved. And I think that belief in and of itself has a ripple effect around other dimensions of our lives. If we believe that we make a difference, then we're more likely to be employed. We're more likely to be taking better care of our health. It can be really catalytic. So,
how about the crime rate up here in this area? Do you get better response by the police?
Oh, the police are amazingly responsive. I have to say, if we merged, that's what I was actually for merging. When we were playing with, I was just intellectually playing with scenarios of us merging. I was like, oh, Cleveland, it would be nice to be a resident of Cleveland. And then the police thing occurred to me, that I would not get the same responsiveness. And I was like, oh, I'll take that back. Because the East Cleveland police are amazingly responsive. And I really feel good about that. I like that they're so responsive.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
But it's a big difference between up here and down there.
I imagine.
It is. What do you think about the budget crisis that East Cleveland is having right now? Because they're going to lose like 10 police.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what-
I think it's another dynamic of where cities are and where our city is, and you know, it could have an impact. I mean, our house has been robbed, so didn't make me want to move, and I wasn't here, and you know, it doesn't change my experience of the neighborhood, and I believe that houses get robbed in different neighborhoods. I mean, it's not like if I was living in Cleveland Heights, it wouldn't happen. So I wonder how that would affect things here, having fewer police. I don't know.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, I have to wait and see. So, but you know, there are things we could, again, it comes back to engagement. If we all know our neighbors better, I know I could do a better job of lighting in my neighborhood because it is really dark here at night.
Oh, it is.
You know, there's this, I did some work on a block, some neighbor circle work a block away, block or two up the street. And I think there's this really kind of interesting tension with this neighborhood in particular, Forest Hill, and what people like about it is that it's quiet and it's dark. You know, there's lots of trees around. And I think people move here that they kind of want to be left alone a little bit. There's a little bit of like that suburban mentality of like, I just want to go in my house and stay quiet and relax, and the serenity of the forest. And in some ways that is counter to what you need to do to have a safe neighborhood.
Right.
You know, you need to know your neighbors. You need to have a really well lit street. I like that it's dark at night. Like, I like to be able to go out and see the stars. So it's a predicament in some ways. It's a forget the word. You know, you can't. It's how do you have both?
Yeah.
Dilemma. That was the word. It's a dilemma.
Yeah. Well, being from the Finger Lakes area, I see how you can appreciate that.
Yeah, I am a nature girl. I am a tree hugger. It is true.
Yeah.
I said, because that's one of the reasons, even though we're going to outgrow this house soon, I said to my husband, like, I don't see any other neighborhood I would want to live in from a tree perspective.
Right. Yeah.
But I know that not everybody's like that. You know, that we have some neighbors that don't like the trees because they make a mess. So I'm like, oh, you should have picked a different street.
Yeah. Well,
But-
have you had an opportunity to visit the East Cleveland Theater?
I have not. Oh, no. I have been there once for performance.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a pretty good asset to the city.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder sometimes by us being involved with having the second largest performing arts theater in the country, you know, I wonder why they don't help small theaters like community theaters like that.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's comes down to that survivability mentality.
I wonder if it's because of the stigma of East Cleveland.
Yeah.
You know, because I know at one time East Cleveland Theater was great place to go and enjoy theater. But things have changed over the years. You know, I don't even get out as much as I used to. Okay.
Oh yeah. Bless you, honey.
That's not-
Okay.
Okay, what would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland a better place to live?
What would I be prepared to do? I would be prepared to help with relationship building and hosting different things like SOMO leadership, and invite people in to see their own power and their own capacity. I'd be willing to get involved to help with physical work, like anything in the park that would involve community effort or any kind of green space work. And these are all things that I can imagine. I'd be willing to help with the schools. I'd be willing to help host things in our living room, you know, if need be.
So as I know, you're quite involved in community activities. Could you tell me a little bit about SOMO?
Sure. So, sorry. SOMO, which is SOMO, is a word that we made up. It's short for social emotional leadership. It's SOMO leadership. And SOMO leadership is the movement is about bringing the, excuse me one moment, please, can you please draw on this for me? Thank you. The movement is about bringing the science of success, happiness, and well-being to Greater Cleveland. And much of what it's about is that when I personally realize how much power I have in my own well-being, and I start doing the activities and the practices to attend to my own well-being, then I really automatically I'm influencing people around me. So the vision for SOMO is that as SOMO attracts and engages and equips people who are already leaders in their own life and gives people the tools, then they'll be likely to share those tools with others, and therefore the whole boat rises. But it's essentially about well-being and equipping people to attend to their own well-being, especially the mind, and how much our mind and our thinking and our beliefs affect the whole of our lives, and realizing that we have the power to influence it. I absolutely agree. Yeah, and we actually have a funding partner, so we could do some interesting strategies there. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ms. DiMarco Kious.
You're welcome.
That's a mouthful.
I know. Thank you for hanging with it.
We really appreciate your interview, and thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure, Hank.
Thank you.